Lesson 17, Buoyancy. Our first objective for this lesson is to be able to define what we mean by buoyancy or the buoyant force. You will also want to be able to analyze the buoyancy of objects, as well as to use what we call the specific gravity of a substance to determine the buoyancy of a substance. So let's talk about buoyancy. Actually, before we can do that, we need to talk about fluids. And fluids are any substance that flows. Now, normally, in everyday language, when we talk about fluids, we mean liquids. But there's another phase of matter besides liquids that flows, and those are gases. So fluids actually encompass both liquids and gases. The thing about fluids is that all fluids exert an upward force on objects called a buoyant force. So when an object displaces a fluid when it's in it, the buoyant force pushes back upwards. If that buoyant force is larger than the force of gravity, the object will float. If the buoyant force is not large enough, the object sinks. So if an object floats to the surface of a fluid, we say that it is positively buoyant. If the substance sinks to the bottom of a fluid, we say it is negatively buoyant. And if the substance neither sinks nor floats, in other words, stays somewhere in between, we say that it is neutrally buoyant. When you're doing your problem set, you will be given certain situations and asked, is the object positively buoyant? In other words, does it float to the surface? Is it neutrally buoyant, or does it neither sink nor float? Or is it negatively buoyant? Does it sink to the bottom? Now, we can mathematically determine whether an object will sink or float based upon what we call an object's specific gravity. The specific gravity of a substance is a comparison of its density to that of water. The reason that we compare this to water is because water is the substance that we are most concerned with things floating in. The density of water is 1 gram per cubic centimeter, so we are comparing the substance's density to 1. If it is greater than 1, it is negatively buoyant. In other words, if it has a density larger than water's, it will sink in water. If it is less than 1, it is positively buoyant. And if it is equal to 1, it is neutrally buoyant. In your problem set, it will be very similar to lesson 12, where you had to find the density. But you will now be asked another question. Will that substance float in water? And you'll do that by comparing that substance's density to 1.